Due to the graphic nature of this program, viewer discretion is advised.
Hello, everyone. It is the Friday, April 3rd, 2026 episode of the Marco Gere Show. Thank you for tuning in to hear today's groundbreaking news right here in America and across the board, where the facts are facts and hard truths thrive. Let's begin the best of radio, informative, uncensored, unapologetic, and ready to go. Folks, we're going to talk about our weekly economic report articles that are hot off the press today. Let's jump right into it. Let's not waste any time. I want you to know what's going on around you. Obviously, the economy is one of the focal points of most Americans. Let's jump into this article I have for us out of the Wall Street Journal today. It says here that hiring defied expectations in March with 178,000 new jobs created. Now, this is obviously blowing past any type of expectation, especially from last month, a resilient rebound that certainly defies all odds. If true, well, hopefully we don't have massive revisions after this. But obviously, this is something for the positive. The March numbers also beat the gain of 59,000 jobs created that economists polled by the Wall Street Journal had expected to see, so obviously a very great gain, as one could imagine. The employment number also falling down to 4.3% from 4.4% just from last month in February. One of the things we have to understand, though, while this looks good, and by the way, this is a very, very good jobs report. While this is good, we have to understand something. Unemployment when President Trump took office in January of last year was 4%. Now it's up at 4.3%. Now it was at 4.6% towards the end of 2025. So it is going down. That is good. We need to understand, though, one of the aspects of this, and again, I don't mean to take away from the positivity of this, not at all. The labor force participation rate shrank by nearly 400,000 people, though, meaning that 400 fewer Americans are now counted as unemployed. Now, the share of Americans working or looking for work slipped to about 61.9%, the lowest level since the fall of 2021. So there you go. Now, one of the things we always have to look for, anytime unemployment rates could mean something to us, obviously, you've got to always look at the labor force participation rate. That is what is crucial in times like this. Now, we want it to be somewhere in the relative mid-60s is always positive. I think the highest we've ever had in the country was 67%, if I'm not mistaken. So when we look at these numbers, what do they really tell us? Do they tell us that things are improving or are they getting worse? Obviously, this report is telling us that things are getting better. But we have to understand, we want Americans that can work. We want that labor force participation number to rise. And usually it's around 62, 63%, whatever you're looking at. So we want that number to rise. The labor force participation number needs to be higher. So we want that number to rise as well. There could be reasons for this too. People could be retiring. People could be leaving the country. There's several different reasons for that. But we want to see that number rise. When we had 1.1 million jobs lost as of last year, obviously we want people to start entering the workforce. People that are leaving college, we want them to get good paying jobs. All these things are major factors of what's going on right now. So the February jobs number, meanwhile, was worse than previously reported. We saw that revision not too long after. The Labor Department said that the economy lost 133,000 jobs in the month of February, after previously estimating just only a loss of 92,000. So there are things we can look for, we can take from this. We've got to look at things, obviously, when they get revised. Obviously, the first number is usually the best number you're going to get. So let's see exactly next month how these numbers actually look. All told, though, the economy created an average of 15,000 jobs each month over the past half year. And that's a big downshift from the same time period last year, when the United States was adding 78,000 jobs on average per month. Now, again, we know that the U.S. has lost jobs in 5 of the past 12 months. Again, not good. If we have a booming economy, you would expect to see more job creation. We need more job creation. So that's why this looks like we're headed in the right direction. Only time will tell if that's the number that is official or if it's a number that is just simply estimated by the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Now, the job gains were driven mainly by a rebound in healthcare and social assistance sectors. Again, a pillar that has held up much of the labor market for much of the past year. Added about 90,000 jobs in March. So we have to look at things, for example, in this case. Let's take this, for example. Healthcare and social assistance jobs. We just had a massive strike last month, did we not? People not working? Are these people getting their jobs back? Are they coming back to work? All these things factor into what's going on. So let's understand what's taking place here. We look at leisure and hospitality, adding 44,000 jobs. We have construction coming back, making a rebound, 26,000 jobs. Very good. Manufacturing rose by 15,000 jobs. We just saw, 5,000 jobs lost as of last month in manufacturing? So we're giving and taking here, it seems. But what needs to take place, we want GDP growth, and we want to make sure that the jobs are staying. We don't want preliminary jobs that just kind of come in seasonal and what have you. We want these jobs to last. That's what we want to see right now. So one of the fewer weak spots with the public sector, it seems, we need to make sure we're getting manufacturing back. We've got to see that. The private sector, excuse me. Now, when we look at the public sector, we look at the federal government payrolls losing about 18,000 jobs. Okay, so there you go. Government getting smaller. Fine by me. I could care less. That's wonderful. We want to get good paying jobs in the private sector, folks. That's what we want. That's what we should be focusing on right now. Again, we can look at the Trump administration's immigration crackdown, which has reduced the number of available workers. That's a truism. That's something that's not going away. That's something that's good. What does this mean for the Fed, by the way? What has Jerome Powell said this week? That the Iran war raises the risk of the central bank may have to choose between fighting inflation and shoring up the labor market, but it wasn't creating a trade-off just yet, is what Friday's data rammed the point home for us. But we got to look at what's going on here. We're looking at inflation rising right now. It's estimated, as I told you last week, roughly going to probably hit at least 4.2% year over year in 2026. That's the latest estimation given the information we're receiving, the Iran war and all the economic ramifications as a result of that, really the shutting of the Strait of Hormuz. So now the Fed was already going to hold rates steady coming the April 28th and 29th meeting. Powell's last statements has made as of that, again, because of the elevated oil prices and the underlying inflationary numbers. So we're not looking at any interest rates cuts just yet as time goes on, or at least for the foreseeable future, ladies and gentlemen. All right, let's move on. This is out of Bloomberg. It says here that the Trump administration said that it will maintain 50% tariffs on many imported steel, aluminum, and copper products. So we ask ourselves, how is this happening? I thought Trump was only going to put down the 15% global tariff on all imports now because his tariff scheme with IEEPA got shot down. Now, what does this mean for construction in the United States? What does this mean for building in the United States? Obviously, it means prices go up. That means inflation goes up. That means costs go up. A senior administration official cast the changes as necessary to simplify a complicated policy and provide more fairness to businesses grappling with President Trump's tariff regime. Now, under the new structure, goods with total steel, aluminum, or copper content below 15% will be effectively exempted from the metals tariffs. Again, I don't know how he's going to be able to institute these, especially with the recent hearing and ruling in the Supreme Court. Some other derivative goods will be subject to a lower 25% rate if they are deemed to be substantially made, one of the metals, according to the statement, is what it says here. This is not good, folks. We've got to look at what the tariff is. It's a tax. That's what I want you to think about. Every time you hear tariff, I want you to think tax. So if we're going to tax steel, what does that mean if you're building a new building? That building is going to cost more to build. What does that mean? Well, that means all the services or the production or the industry that comes out of that building, they've got to make a profit so they can pay off those costs. That's what it comes down to. Now, despite the changes, 15% tariffs will be maintained on a large number of derivative products, including, for example, imported steel pipes. Okay. And of course, the levy will be assessed against the full value of the product, not merely its metal content. I don't know why he's doing this. I got to be honest with you. In a time when we're seeing inflation going up, when it's more difficult to build, in a time where we want more manufacturing to come back, do we really want the price of production to go up? Of course we don't. That's ridiculous. Why would we want that? We should want things to be made as cheaply and efficiently as possible right now, not adding more burden onto these companies that are trying to come back to the United States. I think we all can agree on those things. Again, there's going to be lots of renovation and what have you, should that happen. And again, you have to also consider if you're in a steel factory, if you're producing this, iron ore and what have you, why would we want the cost to go up? We don't want the cost to go up. We want the cost to be low. We want production cost to lower in the United States, not raise. So that's an issue in and of itself. Now, the shift follows months of lobbying by companies that said they were unfairly hit by previous duties targeting metal imports. Obviously, that's true. Though the administration argues that the levies are designed to encourage domestic manufacturing, an extension of the tariffs to so-called derivative products meant they were applied even to items containing small metal elements, just a fraction of the overall product's weight and value. Well, let's look at this. Again, if you've got to import steel, let's say we're not producing enough in this country, and you're forced to do it. Again, I would love it if we were just producing here in the United States and we could be void of all these tariffs. And I understand the underlying issue behind this. We want people to produce steel in the United States, so that way you don't have to get it from somewhere else or import it from abroad. But if we're not producing enough to maintain the demand of it, you've got to go elsewhere. That's just supply and demand issues. So then some companies are now struck with these 50% tariffs on buying the same good. Again, I would like to see something different with these tariffs. I'd like to see it more reasonable. I don't think you should be penalizing a 50% tax on people just buying steel alone that are producing good-paying jobs, good products in the United States. I simply don't see the reason for all that. Again, it only adds to more inflation. That offsets the price of goods and services here inside the United States. Very key issue here. So I'd like to see that lowered at least. I don't know why he needs to put a 50% levy on foreign steel and aluminum. I really don't see that. Again, that decision will be wound up hitting major trading partners hard. Think Canada, think the EU, Mexico, South Korea. And, the market has to respond, though. If you're paying 50% more for that steel and you're producing it for 50% less here in the United States, your price has to go up a little bit, right? You want to create a competitive market. Oh, they're going to charge 50%? Well, they're going to come to me if I charge just 20% more. Prices have to adapt, and that's what I'm seeing with all this. So let's hope that at least comes down significantly. Again, I understand the tariff issue. You want to buy in America, but we've got to produce here in the United States first. You can't just rely on tariffing everything. By the way, since we're talking about inflation and tariffs, which are a tax, by the way, everything imported gets at least a 15% tax. And again, steel, aluminum, copper, they're getting a 50% tax somehow. But this article on Fox Business really caught my eye today. It says here that 46% of Americans say they don't expect to be financially prepared when they stop working, is what a latest study has just found. What's the magic number? That's what Americans believe they need to have saved up for retirement. And that number has jumped up significantly from just a year ago, as many express anxiety about their recent retirements. What did a Northwestern Mutual study find? What did they tell us here? They said that the retirement savings for Americans that they believe is the number they should have in order to comfortably retire rose to $1.46 million. That figure is up an increase of $200,000 just from last year. Yeah, well, why is that? Uncertainty. Uncertainty in inflation. Uncertainty in the markets. So the new magic number reflects a convergence of factors. Persistent in inflation, longer life expectancies, to uncertainty about the future of Social Security. All these things factor into this number. Now, again, the numbers can be different for different people in different parts of the country. If you're going to retire at 65 in, let's say, Los Angeles, California, I think you want a lot more than $1.46 billion. And again, it's going to be different for people's, obviously, their salary of which they currently live or which current lifestyle they live in. But 1.46 was the number. Having said that, if you were somebody that has, for example, a net worth of $1 million or more in investable assets, that magic number goes even higher to $2.67 million on average. Again, it depends on who you are and what your expectations are. So what they're seeing is retirement is increasingly becoming a complex issue for Americans, and they're responding by setting higher expectations for what they'll need. What matters now is really pairing those expectations with thoughtful, comprehensive financial plans that will enable people to reach these unique goals. But isn't that interesting? 46% of Americans say they don't even feel that they'll reach that. They're not financially prepared for retirement. By the way, 48% said it's somewhat or very likely that they will outlive their savings. Again, that's worrisome. That's why I see a lot of elderly Americans going back to work. Maybe they work at Walmart or something part-time just to make ends meet after they've retired and they're receiving a pension or they're using Social Security or their savings to sustain their lifestyle. But isn't that interesting? When you're on a fixed income after time and you've got it set up for the next 20 years, I'm going to spend X number of dollars. Every single month I'll pay this amount of money. Well, folks, as time goes on, as costs go up, let's say it's cost of utilities. Let's say it's the cost of property tax or, again, inflation. Or, for example, the inflation in pharmaceuticals. We're seeing tariffs coming in on those right now. Isn't that interesting? So all these things factor into an elderly person's decision. Hey, I'm 65, I'm ready to retire, I've been working for the last 40 years. What am I going to do now? Do I have enough to save up? And that's why I found that just 23% of Americans with retirement savings say that they will have only 1 year or less of their current income set aside. Yep, troubling times ahead for our retirees. So what's the answer? How do people plan for their retirements? That's what I want to ask you. What's the safest rule? And there's a couple different aspects of which you can approach this with. But one of the things I figured out here, and it's detailed in several other retirement rules of thumb, and that is the so-called 25X rule. What does that mean? It suggests that a person should save about 25 times their expected annual savings. So if we're using the 1.46 magic number from the study, that would be sufficient to generating about $58,000 in annual retirement income every single year. That's the money you have set aside. So can you live off $58,000 for the year? That's the big question. Now, another rule of thumb you can look at is the $1,000 a month rule, which states very clearly that for every $1,000 of desired monthly retirement spending, there should be $300,000 in savings. So, for example, if you had the $1.46 million in the retirement, it would yield about $4,800 in retirement income per month. So we see how these things can shift over time. Again, it's different for different people. So these rules of thumb can certainly give Americans a ballpark for their estimate of which they think is going to be, their wealth management goals and what have you. But people are again, this is largely the baby boomer generation. These are the people that have had these long-lasting careers. Maybe they worked, 35 years in education. Now they're ready to retire. Do they have enough money to retire? Or maybe you owned a business for the last 45 years. And now you're saying, hey, now it's time for me to get out. I'm ready. I just want to relax. I want to retire. I'm 70. I want this to be over with now. I'm sick of working 70 hours a week or 80 hours a week. I want this to be done. Do I have enough means to do this? And this is what's troubling for this generation of Americans. So that's why I think looking at a lot of these things, again, working with a financial planner is always a great idea when you're young and when you're getting old. Planning ahead. Hey, I just got this job. What do I need to be able to retire in? Let's say my plan is 30 years. You know, you should have a plan at hand because you can't rely on Social Security, folks. We talked about this just last week, too. They owe so much money. The government owes so much money because they've taken so much out of the Social Security program. Is that money even going to be there over time? We'd like to think so, but is that a reality that it might not be there? It might go away. Or it might be greatly reduced. We don't know. So we've got to consider these things, folks, when we're planning, especially if you're a young American listening right now. You've got to start putting things away. Think 401k. Think just diversifying your assets. You can't just rely on one single bank account. You've got to diversify. Let things grow over time. And that's probably the best way you can go about doing that. Remember, I always tell you, talk to a financial planner. When I read you our weekly stock numbers, don't just listen, hey, Jerry said that sounds like a great idea. No, go talk to somebody about it. Is this a good investment for me? What can I do with this? Like anything I always tell you, make sure you're always doing your own research as time goes on, folks. All right, let's move on. By the way, before we move on, I want to share this with you, too. And again, it's not shocking at any stretch of the imagination, but this is the Associated Press. It says that the Trump budget seeks now $1.5 trillion in defense spending alongside cuts in domestic programs. So now we're just funneling all this money into a wartime budget, which I told you when I first heard this proposal at the beginning of the year. I said, we're getting ready for a long-term war. We're getting ready for rebuilding. And why wouldn't we? We've already got to spend over $100 billion if we're even able to stay in the Middle East. So let's take a look at this. It says here, President Donald Trump has proposed boosting defense spending to $1.5 trillion in his 2027 budget released on Friday. Right? That was the estimate he had put out earlier. The largest such request in decades, reflecting his emphasis on U.S. military investments over domestic programs. So what are we doing? Instead of investing in Social Security, we're investing in war. We're investing in that budget. We're investing in military-industrial complex programs. And, of course, those industries that are attached to it. I think maybe you should be investing in that, folks. Who knows? Now, the sizable increase for the Pentagon has been telegraphed by the Republican president even before the U.S.-led war against Iran began. And again, I told you this was coming too. I said, we're going to get into something. We have to be. Why would you ask for a budget that big? Why would you ask for, what was it, $600 billion more? Unless you were planning to do something much more longer term. Or if you were thinking about depleting, for example, all of our munitions. That's another problem. We look at what we give to Ukraine, Israel, all these other countries of which we're allies of. But those two take really the bulk of all those things. But when you're giving this amount of money, when you're giving this amount of, for example, munitions, and you've got to rebuild on your own, when you're using them, right? If you're bombing the Houthis last year for several months and it's costing $1 billion a day, that's troublesome. Right? You've got to rebuild, and you've got to get those stockpiles replenished. So President Donald Trump promised to reinvest in America's national security infrastructure to make sure our nation is safe in a dangerous world. Okay, all right. I think diplomacy would be a much better option. Of course, we should always be ready, folks. And I'm not saying we shouldn't rebuild our military. But why are we investing that much? It's because we're obviously planning to be in these long-term wars. That's what it comes down to. That's what it's all about. And remember, he's talked about going into Cuba. He's talked about going into Colombia. He's talked about Mexico. He's talked about Greenland. All of those will cost lots and lots of money, lots of billions of dollars. So I don't think we're even going to be done with Iran whenever that ends, if it should even end in the next couple of months. And again, I told you before, that's just beginning to escalate as time goes on. We'll talk about that in just a little bit. But this year, the White House's document intended to provide a roadmap for the president to Congress as lawmakers build their own budgets and annual appropriation bills to keep the government funded. Yeah. So what are we going to do with this, folks? What is the end result of all this? What are we going to do? with this extra $600 billion? Are we investing just here in the United States? Are we giving the profit to Boeing and Raytheon and God knows who else? Lockheed Martin? I mean, it's pretty safe to say that these are very big budget spendings. I mean, look at where we are, though. So instead of going in and put money into Social Security, Medicaid, Medicare, for example, investing just here inside the United States, investing in our own infrastructure that's crumbling across the country, we're investing in war. I want to refer you to something very important I saw recently. I was looking at since 2000 inside of China. Okay, so think about 26, 25 years ago. They entered the World Trade Organization, and their GDP went from being completely stagnant for, I think it was 3 decades. It didn't even move. I mean, it was just that weak. They enter the World Trade Organization, and then their GDP skyrockets. Now they're producing. Now they're growing. Did they develop a wartime strategy? Did they just invest in munitions? No, of course not. They invested in their country. They invested in highway programs, infrastructure programs. You look at China in 1970, you look at their roadmap, if you will. You look at it today, it's beaming with brand new infrastructure, bridges, roads, tunnels, all across that country. It's pristine, it's clean. You look at Russia, same thing. Then you look at the United States, we have broken down roads, broken down infrastructure, roads, bridges, tunnels, you name it. You have 20% of our city, our urban development, is completely empty. What's that going to mean for our banking and building bust that's coming really, really soon? Well, only time will tell. But these are all problems. When you don't invest in your nation, of which your citizens pay taxes to at all, or you take that money and you use it for something else, which we're infamous for. When you tell people, hey, you've worked for the last 40 years, you've paid into Social Security, sorry, we just can't seem to give you much more than this. And you're like, well, hey, I can't live off this. And they say, well, hey, the hell with you. Go get another job then. I mean, that's the end result of what we're seeing right now. So, can we get money for immigration enforcement? Maybe that would be something more beneficial. Maybe air traffic controllers, investing in our national parks, our infrastructure. I think that'd be a much better use of, $600 billion versus putting it into a military budget. That's just me. I could be wrong. I don't think so, but I could be wrong. And look at this. It says a 13% increase in the funding for the Department of Justice just to focus on violent criminals. And what the budget said is the president's promise to stop what is called migrant crime. A $10 billion fund within the National Park Service for construction and beautification projects inside Washington, D.C. A $481 million increase to enhance aviation safety and air support in air traffic controlling, hiring surges. And he's also talking about cuts to green energy, housing, and health programs. Look at this, 19% cut into the Department of Agriculture. Why do we want that? Why do we want to make things more difficult for our farmers, folks? A 13% cut for the Department of Housing and Urban Development. What good is that anyways? That whole program's a sham. And 12% decrease in Health and Human Services Department. So we got to cut off Bobby Kennedy from, I guess, running tests on vaccinations. I don't know what. Again, there's good in all these programs. I'm not saying there isn't. But when we look at these cuts, when we look at money for certain things, yeah, okay, immigration enforcement is very important. I think we should be building that wall, to be honest with you. Building a structure between you and another country that is sending illegal aliens across the border to the tune of millions a year, that's something worthwhile. And of course, putting people on that wall to defend it, to intercept that, to secure our sovereignty. That's got merit to it. That's got good use to it. But again, when we talk about beautification of our parks, sure, absolutely. Keeping everything clean, keeping everything trimmed. I like that idea. I like putting money into stuff like that. Air traffic controllers, fine, good. But that's a sliver of this massive increase of which we're talking about right now. We spend more than the next 10 countries behind us in military spending, folks. Just keep that in mind. That means you are investing in military intervention, whatever that may be, whether it be even just housing troops overseas. And again, I think you're going to see A lot of these countries in the Gulf, Arab states in particular, are saying goodbye to the United States soon. And if we're doing that, if we are moving out of these regions, if we're moving out of, let's say, for example, NATO, what does that mean for us inside the country? It means you don't need to spend that much money. It means you can bring some of these troops back home. Maybe you can even put them on our southern border. God, that'd be great, wouldn't it? Defending your own homeland? I think that'd be worthwhile for the Department of Defense. All these things are very, very crucial. And we're spending money. We don't need to keep funding wars, folks. We don't need to keep funding these endless wars. We don't need to keep giving foreign aid to these countries when we are broke. Now, that's just my take on it. Some people would disagree with me. They would say, obviously, having stronger allies is good. Fine, let them fund their own. Let them do it. What's stopping them? Nothing. But if you're going to keep giving billions and billions and billions to various countries every single year, I mean, it's ridiculousness. It's absolutely ridiculousness. And we need to get away from that as soon as possible. We're broke, folks. We have nothing in the bank. We're deficit spending year after year. Let's cut these budgets down. Let's get to some fiscal conservatism for once. I think that would be much more beneficial. I think most Americans would even go for that, to be honest with you. We're saying, hey, we're going to cut these budgets down. We're going to live within our means. We're going to put money in various programs that, yes, help Americans. We're going to rebuild America. We're not going to keep getting in these endless wars for other countries because we don't need to be involved in that. I think that would be a step in the right direction. And frankly, I think that's what the founders would want first and foremost. All right, folks, let's move on to our weekly economic report. Let's look at our stock numbers. Let's not waste any more time. S&P 500 trading as it closed out yesterday because the markets are closed today. Trading at $6,582.69, up just, 0.11%, barely noticeable. NASDAQ trading at $21,879.18. Trading up just about 0.18%, again, barely noticeable. And the Dow Jones trading at $46,504.67. Pam Bondi, eat your heart out. It's not at 50,000, but hey, it's still pretty good. But that is down 0.13%. So we got little change in the S&P 500 and NASDAQ. Small marginal gains right now. And the Dow slips just modestly. Again, all these three indexes are very much influenced by oil prices right now, the Iran-related geopolitical tension, and of course the tech sector volatility, which we'll get into right now with our tech and crypto stocks. Let's look at Bitcoin first. It's trading at $66,848.88 a share, down just 0.10%. We've got NVIDIA trading at $177.39 a share. That is up by 0.93%, almost a percent. Meta trading at $574.46 a share. That is down just about 5 points, 0.82%. Apple trading at $255.92 a share, up 0.11%. Amazon down just barely, almost a point. Trading at $209.77 a share. Google, Alphabet, whatever you want to call it, $295.77 a share. Down almost just over 0.5% from yesterday's close, or excuse me, the previous day's close, rather. Microsoft trading at $373.46 a share, up 1.11%. That is up fairly well. And then we look at Dell Technologies, one of the winners of the week, trading at $174.37 a share, up almost 3% from the previous day's close. And finally, we've got Broadcom, up just slightly, just over a point. We're up $314.55 a share, closing out yesterday. So this week, the market was pretty mixed to slightly negative for the mega cap tech complex. You know, we're looking at things like semiconductor outperforming, while the ad-driven and consumer-facing tech lagged this week. And we're looking at Bitcoin trading mostly sideways with mild downward pressure. So the biggest winners were Dell and NVIDIA. We look at the posting the strongest relative performance this week, supported by the continued AI infrastructure demand that we continue to see. Let's jump into metals. We've got gold trading at $4,626.40 an ounce. It's down 2.76%. We look at silver trading at $71.05 an ounce, down 5.5%. But let's look at platinum now, trading at $1,915 an ounce, down some 2.35%. And then we've got palladium trading at $1,449 an ounce, down almost a percentage. So we got some sharp pullbacks across the gold, silver, platinum, and palladium market. And again, that reflects a combination of a couple things. So you got a lot of people now in the profit-taking margin after the strong multi-month rallies we saw behind each and every one of these precious metals. We've also got a firmer U.S. dollar right now. Again, it's up just a little bit, which again typically pressures the metal to go in the opposite direction. So when the U.S. dollar rises, the precious metal market tends to drop just a little bit. You've also got reduced safe haven demand as the markets digest the geopolitical headlines. Again, think about the war. Again, it's slightly less urgent to invest in these. So that's why we're looking at certain things like this. We got silver, though, outsized drop of just over 5%, though. This is typical because silver behaves as both a precious metal and also an industrial metal. You didn't know that it's being put into some of our missile programs. Well, it is. So it's useful for that too. And again, it makes it more sensitive to economic growth concerns. That's why silver is a little bit outperforming as far as in its reduction in this aspect. Again, I told you before, I still think that gold is going to go up this year. Again, once we see the economy start to reflect what's happening in the Middle East, in this war, I think you're going to start seeing these prices start to go back up. But again, they're still up very high year over year. So just be aware of all that. And finally, let's look at our oil crude benchmarks. Look at WTI crude, folks, closing out yesterday at $111.54 per barrel. That is up 11.41% from the previous close. My goodness. Look at Brent crude out of Europe, trading at $109.03 per barrel, up 7.78%. Murbain crude out of the United Arab Emirates, trading at $114.84 per barrel, up 10.82%. That's because it's not moving anywhere. And then we got Urals crude coming out of Russia, up significantly since just before this war, but down slightly because of the discounts that they're getting right now, that they continue to have due to sanctions and the limited market access. That's trading at $105.73, down 14.35% from the previous close. So, the oil market is still flowing, though. But I want to point your attention, before the war started inside Iran, that was trading at, I think, about $58, if I'm not mistaken, $58 per barrel. And just a month later, it's trading now at $105, almost $106 per barrel. So think about that for a second. What the Russians are now selling from just a month ago, now they're trading almost $50 more. I mean, it's crazy. It's crazy. But this is where we are, folks. This is all that's happening. So again, the oil benchmarks remain elevated. It's volatile. Again, driven by the Middle East tensions, especially with what's taking place in Iran and the Strait of Hormuz. This raises the supply disruption risk. You've also got the OPEC plus production discipline, keeping supply tight. That's taking place. Again, we're involved in that as well. So all these factors rally into why we're seeing the oil markets up. The oil futures are rising. And again, you have people investing in them as a result of this. They know that if they go to, let's say, for example, $140, $150, $200 a barrel, they're going to get their return pretty easily at the height of this war. And I told you before, I don't think we're even reaching the height of that just yet. So that's it, folks. Those are our stock numbers for this week. And again, the markets are closed today because of Good Friday. So we'll see how things turn on Monday, or what could take place, what events take place in the Middle East over this weekend, which, again, I think something will happen very, very soon. Remember, Trump attacks significantly when the markets are closed. That is always true across the board. Every time he has attacked Iran in any significant way, it has always been over the weekend. So if he starts to, for example, take out their oil wells or their energy infrastructure and they respond in kind inside the Gulf Arab states over the weekend, it's because the markets are closed already. And he makes some rhetoric next week about how, okay, we're going to start winding down. Well, the markets respond to that too, the rhetoric. But they cannot ignore if a supply chain, a bottlenecking occurs, and 20% of the global oil supply, for example, that strait stays closed for everybody, goes away. You can't get away from that. That's when the reality starts to set in. And since we're talking about the Iran war, let's go to this article I have in CNBC. It says here that U.S. fighter jets are now downed in Iran, and the search for the 2 crew members is on. This is horrible. Now, it's not clear if the plane was shot down or if it went down for any other reasons. We don't know just yet. But the jet was an F-15 with 2 crew members on it, and their whereabouts are still unknown. The Pentagon and U.S. Central Command did not immediately respond for any comment. The New York Times said that the Iranians shot down the fighter jet, citing U.S. and Israeli officials and Iranian state media, though the independently verified sources have not yet been confirmed. So we don't know if they're dead, if they're alive, if they're captured as of just yet. Again, it's very, very unfortunate we're in these situations, folks. But it does appear to be the first loss of a U.S. jet in the country since the war in Iran started last February. The downing of the jet comes at a really delicate time, too, folks, when the U.S. has shown few signs of slowing down its assault on Iran and reports of potential peace talks not yielding a breakthrough. Now, we could talk about, for instance, I came to find out yesterday in my research, and you're going to love this too, by the way. Let me tell you this. Witkoff has not spoken to a single Iranian diplomat this entire time. Then we get talks from President Trump saying that Witkoff and Kushner were making such great gains in all this. All this talk is through third parties. So we're not even sitting down face to face with them and having direct conversations. Why? Because I told you diplomacy was not the number one issue. I'll say it again. Diplomacy was not their intent. They were not taking it seriously. Now we're talking about bombing Iran's bridges. We'll talk about the B-1 bridge being bombed in just a moment. We were talking about pharmaceutical companies being bombed. We're talking about steel manufacturing industries bombed. We're now talking about hitting civilian infrastructure. That's the way that this is moving now. It's unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable. President Trump claimed in a social media post today that the U.S. could easily open the Strait of Hormuz, take the oil, and make a fortune. So what, we're going to steal more oil from people? What, are we become pirates, the United States? Is that where we're headed now, folks? We're also talking about the critical Strait of Hormuz. We're talking about the threatening of critical crude oil. We're talking about fertilizer, other commodities that come out of that region, of which we are relying on. The fertilizer, the urea. We're talking about 20% of what our farmers use inside the United States gone. What does that mean? It means higher prices now. That's what that comes down to. Supply and demand, folks. Economics 101. By the way, Trump also threatened late Thursday to escalate attacks on Iranian infrastructure, as I just said to you. Yep. He said the U.S. has not even started destroying what's left in Iran. So now are we really going to go into bombing civilian sites? Is this what we've become? We're not hitting military targets. We're not attacking these facilities or installations. Now we're talking about actually destroying Iranian infrastructure that's crucial for civilians, which again equates to a war crime. I can't tell it to you any other way, folks, so I'll just tell it to you how it is. That's the truth of the matter. By the way, this was Trump speaking about this during his speech on Wednesday evening. Let's take another quick listen to this because I want everybody to know exactly what is taking place. This is where we are now in this conflict. We are past any bit of diplomacy. And by the way, I thought the 15-point plan was going accordingly. I thought we were sitting down with somebody in the Iranian government. We don't know who it was. But that they were going to give us everything we wanted in this 15-point plan. We even might ask for more things because they were so generous and willing to have a ceasefire and agree to this 15-point plan of which we know nothing about. This was Trump speaking on Wednesday evening. Let's take another listen to it.
If during this period of time no deal is made, we have our eyes on key targets If there is no deal, we are going to hit each and every one of their electric generating plants very hard and probably simultaneously. We have not hit their oil, even though that's the easiest target of all, because it would not give them even a small chance of survival or rebuilding. But we could hit it, and it would be gone, and there's not a thing they could do about it. They have no anti-aircraft equipment. Their radar is 100% annihilated. We are unstoppable as a military force.
Okay, so he said we're unstoppable as a military force. Okay, all right. Let's take him at his word. Let's say we are unstoppable. And again, we're hitting lots of these targets. We're hitting well over, 12,000 now? 13,000? We don't even know. And by the way, before I move on, I was listening back to his speech yesterday evening, and I missed something yesterday. And I can't believe I forgot to talk about this yesterday. He's now upped the number of Iranians killed in these protests earlier this year to 45,000. Now, for anyone who's listened to me for any length of time, I've told you very clearly that the real number of people killed on both sides, the government and the people in the streets, by the way, which, again, the government was not targeting peaceful protesters. They were not targeting peaceful protesters. They were targeting the violent mobs that were in the streets, first and foremost. Let's just be very clear about that. The real number is 3,170. How do I know this? Because Patrick Henningsen, an independent journalist of the United States, by the way, other journalists as well, right before the war happened, went to Iran, they saw the documentation, they spoke with people on the ground, and they were there during the National Rally Day. And how many people were in the streets in Iran on National Rally Day? 4 million people came out in support of the Ayatollah after his calling. Now, let me ask you this. By the way, 20 million took to the streets that day, too. So let's say that's the low number. But how many people support President Trump? They don't go to his rallies. Obviously, the numbers are much higher of people that support President Trump and his policies when he ran back in 2024. Imagine that, though. You get 20 million people out on the streets after they so-called killed 45,000 people. That doesn't make any sense. If your government was terrorizing you and killing you because you're protesting the economy, which that's what the first protests were, which got hijacked by these intelligence factions, I guess we'll call that, the Kurds, the Baluchs, the Mujahideen al-Khalqs, those factions. You have to think about these things. Why would the people go out and support the government after they killed 45,000 of their fellow Iranians? Because these people were violent. They killed innocent people that were in the streets. They set fires to buildings and cars and what have you. They attacked military bases. And what do we expect the Iranian government to just stand there? By the way, they set police officers on fire. Patrick Henningsen saw all this information. He saw that each and every person that was killed, whether it be police officer, civilian, rioter, violent rioter, I guess we'll call him that. They all had an Iranian ID next to their name. They identified all these people. The number was, I want to say too, unless the body was so badly burned, which they couldn't ID the body at that point. But the number was 3,170 killed. Where are they getting this 45,000 number from? Remember, it was 30,000 for a long time. It was 30,000. Well, actually, it was 5,000. Then it was 10,000. The number just kept going up and up. And I'm like, what is going on here? Every day we find 5,000 new dead people. Where are we getting these numbers from? They never tell us. Anyways, he was there. He was on the ground. He spoke to people. He saw the documentation. And I trust his hard work and, of course, his dedication to the truth versus just listening to what government pundits are saying. Again, you can take it at his word. You can believe the 45,000 number. But isn't it interesting that number will probably go to 50,000 very shortly? I'm just going to say that out loud. But this is part of the rhetoric. Listen, this government just killed 45,000 of its own people. We've got to go in. As if that was the reason for us to go into this conflict, which, of course, it wasn't. But this is where we are. That makes everything we're doing okay then, does it not? That's the whole purpose behind it. It's to get you behind this war. That was the whole reason for the speech. And by the way, I don't think President Trump was convincing like he usually is. I don't think he swayed any votes. I don't believe that. I don't think he convinced anyone that this is for good cause. We still have no imminent threat given to us. Not one. We still have no reason for the progress or the objectives of this war are being met, which we don't even know what they are at this point. Is it to save the Iranian people now? Is that what it is? Is it to prevent the nuclear weapons program that doesn't even exist? Is it to stop their ballistic missile program, which they have because they don't have nuclear weapons? All these things should be asked and answered. Unfortunately, it rarely ever happens. So here's where we are now. This is out of Fox News. It says Iran's tallest bridge collapses after reported U.S. airstrikes. Yep, so now we are threatening to strike their infrastructure. The Iranians are well aware of this, and now the Iranians are now threatening American allies, that would be the Gulf Arab states, in retaliation for this. Isn't that wonderful? It says here the Iranians' IRGC reportedly identified bridges in Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, and Abu Dhabi as potential targets. So this is all coming to a head, folks. How popular are these Gulf Arab families that run these countries going to be after this entire war? Once they stop getting water, access gets shut off, access to food, the access to a proper economy. They're not going to be very popular, are they, folks? I don't think so. But look at this. It says here that the Iranians' biggest bridge near Tehran has crashed down in a stunning scene captured on camera following reports of U.S. airstrikes. It says the B1 highway, a key link between Iran's capital and the western city of Karaj, is considered the tallest bridge in the Middle East, and it was only inaugurated earlier this year. Iranian state TV reported warnings of potential retaliation, claiming that the state's military has identified multiple bridges in American allied Middle Eastern nations as new targets. Wonderful. Isn't that nice? So now we're hitting civilian infrastructure. What do you think that means for these countries in the Middle East? Now their desalination plants are going to be targeted. Their oil fields are going to be targeted. Because they're hosting the United States. They're hosting the United States to allow them to go on and attack the Iranians. And we're only talking about ramping this up. We're saying they haven't seen anything yet. So as I said to you before, bridges, they're going to be hitting pharmaceuticals. God knows they'll hit hospitals. We've already done that. We had a neonatal center in a hospital on the first day of this war. It's unbelievable, folks. It really is. So I told you before, I think, this is my prognostication, you're going to see something ramp up very, very soon this weekend. Whether it be this evening, is what I'm estimating. It'll probably happen then. That's my guess. That's my hypothesis for you. You'll see something very, very big. This bridge was just part of it. The United States is going to start hitting a lot of these targets, I think, at the same time to create chaos in the streets. That's what they're hoping to do. And that's what's going to cause the Iranians to retaliate in kind to this. It's only going to get worse. I think you'll see the Houthis really start to ramp up what's taking place inside of Israel. And Hezbollah is going to be continuing to do what they're doing in the north. That's what's going to take place. So here we are. And by the way, recruitment has never been higher inside of Iran for the military as well. Even we have Iraqis now wanting to get into this war to save the Iranian people. That's how ridiculous this entire thing is. And by the way, just so before I move on to my last couple of articles here, The Hill has an article saying that international law experts say that the United States strikes on Iran may have amounted to war crimes. Yes, absolutely. You can't strike civilian infrastructures. They say here in this letter, we are seriously concerned about the strikes that have hit schools, health facilities, and homes. Well, you can't target civilian infrastructure. That's against, obviously, Geneva Convention. It's against international law. And we're very much a part of all that because we helped write this, just so we're aware of this. So it called out specific strikes on the all-Iranian girls' school in Taipei. Yep, there we are. Yeah, and by the way, people just brush that off like, it's civilian target, it happens, casualties, collateral damage, no biggie. We meant to hit the building, folks. And we meant to hit the building because we removed all rules of engagement. That is the truth of the matter. It wasn't hit because it was a mistake. We meant to hit the building. We just didn't do the recognizance to figure out that, yes, this is a school about a half a mile away from this military site, which we're striking. It's amazing to me. People make excuses for this, that, collateral damage. Can you imagine if the Iranians were to say they struck the United States with ICBMs and they struck a elementary school of a girls' school and killed 165 American girls ages 6 to 12 and their teachers as well? Can you imagine what our response would be? And rightfully so. We'd be outraged. We'd be upset. We'd want blood. And the reason this happened is because Pete Hegseth removed all rules of engagement. He was very happy to do that. He bragged about it just the previous year. And we did a double tap on that school and incinerated at least 68 young schoolgirls. So it's crazy. People back this up. And again, in a war of aggression, a war of choice, a war we don't have to be involved in. Trump said it himself. We don't have to be involved in this war. Well, this is where we are. Oh, by the way, before I finish up with my last article, before we close out the show for the week, this is out of Breitbart. It says here that the UN postponed an urgent vote set Friday on approving the use of defensive force to protect shipping transiting the embattled Strait of Hormuz from Iranian attacks because of a mix-up over the date. That's the genius of our leaders, folks. The 50-member council was set to convene Friday morning and vote on a draft resolution bought by Bahrain, but just hours before the meeting was abruptly canceled. Yep, there you go. So are we going to see a greater war, folks? Are we going to start seeing, for example, France and Japan have said that they want to actually get involved in opening up the Strait of Hormuz? Absolutely ridiculous. They'd just be setting targets. That's all they'd be. Did they not realize this? Did they not care? Only time will tell. But this is what's going on. This stranglehold over this key shipping passage now is now getting other countries now involved in this. And like I said to you before, it's only going to get much, much worse as time goes on. There you go. Thank you, Donald Trump, for that. Get us out of this war. I've been saying this from the start. We don't need to be involved in this war. Get us out of it. Let's turn to something positive, though, before we end today's broadcast. We have a few moments remaining. This is out of Fox News. This is something positive we can all look at, folks. It's obviously Holy Week. Today's Good Friday. Tomorrow's Holy Saturday. Sunday's Easter, of course. This is good. I like this article. It says, Catholic conversions rise as young adults hungry for truth turn to faith and reject secularism. Finally, something we like. Something that's positive in this country. We got Catholic leaders now across the United States are now reporting to give us sharp increases in the number of adult converts now. The Archdiocese of Newark, for example, in New Jersey, reported 1,701 individuals were now preparing to join the Catholic Church. This is a 30% increase from the numbers in 2025. Other archdioceses are reporting similar rises in Cleveland, Ohio, Boston, Massachusetts, Portland, Oregon, home of Antifa. Oh my goodness. Have they had enough of it? Are they ready to become adults finally? Only time will tell. But look at this, though. We have record numbers of people yearning for Jesus. And I think that's wonderful. And by the way, it's not just Catholicism. It's over a plethora of the denominations in the Christian churches across America. This is wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. And I'm very happy to see this. And God bless all these people that are joining the church. I hope they stay true to their faith. I really do. It says here in the article, it said, last year we broke the record for the number of adult converts, and this year, we have what's called the right of election. That's when all the people are entering into the church. We broke that record again. So it's a trend that is very visible over the church and has certainly been true in my diocese, is what Bishop Robert Barron had told Fox News. By the way, we're seeing Catholic ministries across college campuses, Texas A&M, University of Notre Dame, Arizona State University, also reporting increases in converts. So the Catholic Standard helped to associate with. This is great. This is wonderful. This is something we should all be behind. We should be happy about this. And again, it's really remarkable that people are seeing the light. They're seeing the truth. They're sick of the secularism. They're sick of the vanity. And especially things like social media, which they're all engrossed with. And, you say, well, they shouldn't be on these things. Well, again, this is the generation of which they're a part of. They've grown up on this nonsense. So I'm happy to see that they're letting the light of Jesus come into their lives, something true, something pure, and I hope they stick with it. I hope they stay with it. I hope their thoughts and their actions in this country, that we make a better country, not a worse country, that we treat each other better in this Easter season, and we continue to do so as we move forward. Wouldn't that be something great? Isn't that something we could all get behind and be very happy about? I think so, folks. And I just want to say I wish everyone a happy Easter if you celebrate it. God bless you if you're celebrating Passover. Same to you. And, of course, if you do nothing, God bless you as well. I always say that to you because I mean it. Folks, again, thanks you for being here as always. It's another show down, another week ended. So I hope I'll see you back here on Monday for, again, more of the Marco Dre Show, folks. Make sure you're staying prepped. Make sure you are keeping your house in order, storing up anything you need to be self-sufficient, folks. Have a great weekend. I'll see you back here on Monday for more groundbreaking news on the next Marco Dre Show. Until then, be good, stay busy, and God bless.